Dear students and history buffs, today we delve into one of the most complex and decisive periods in European history, the 14th century or 14th century. This was no ordinary era, but a time of profound crisis that shook the foundations of society. The 14th century was a period of enormous demographic upheavals which reshaped the continent's human map. At the same time, pervasive economic crises severely tested established systems. The European political landscape was also shaken by significant instability and change. These combined factors led to a radical transformation of medieval society, marking a point of no return. Far from being merely destructive, the crisis of the 14th century acted as a powerful catalyst. It triggered a subsequent and fundamental phase of Reconstruction. This tumultuous period fostered the emergence of new dynamics in every aspect of European life. These would lay the foundation for the modern age that was about to dawn. Among the many crisis factors, one event in particular shook Europe with unprecedented violence: the Black Death of 1348. It was a devastating epidemic of unprecedented proportions. The disease was carried primarily by fleas that parasitized rats, spreading with incredible rapidity along trade routes. This calamity decimated the European population in a dramatic and unprecedented manner. Current estimates indicate a loss of between 30% and 60% of the continent's total population. Such a catastrophic demographic impact was unparalleled in recorded history. Entire communities, villages, and cities were literally swept away by the wave of disease. The survivors found themselves facing an unrecognizable world. The economic consequences were equally significant and complex. Labor shortages became a pressing problem across all sectors. As a result, wages for the remaining workers increased significantly. This altered the established social and economic balance. At the same time, a decline in agricultural production was inevitable, leading to famine and further suffering. Entire lands remained uncultivated. This economic instability generated profound social tensions. Discontent spread widely among the poorer classes. These tensions resulted in numerous peasant revolts, including the famous Jacquerie in France in 1358. The peasants protested against injustice and poverty. Similarly, England was the scene of a major peasant revolt in 1381, also driven by economic and social demands. These events demonstrated the fragility of the established order. The crisis of the 14th century did not spare even the highest authorities, marking the irreversible decline of universal power. These were traditionally represented by the Church and the Empire. The Church, in particular, was profoundly weakened by internal and external events. The Western Schism, with the simultaneous presence of multiple popes, undermined its unity and spiritual authority. The rampant corruption within the ecclesiastical hierarchy also contributed to its disrepute. Many believers began to doubt the moral integrity of the institution. As a result, the Church lost much of its credibility and prestige among the common people and rulers. Its spiritual and political influence suffered greatly. The empire, for its part, proved increasingly incapable of maintaining order and unity across its vast territory. Its authority was often only nominal. It failed to effectively address the growing autonomy and demands of feudal lords and city-states. These local entities gained ever greater power. This power vacuum left by the decline of universal powers had decisive consequences. It favored the rise of new and more agile political entities. These new realities would redefine the European political map for centuries to come. They were destined to transcend the medieval universalistic model. Another crucial factor that shaped the 14th century and beyond was the famous Hundred Years' War, fought between France and England between 1337 and 1453. This was a long and intermittent conflict characterized by bloody and devastating battles. It was not only a military conflict but also a period of intense diplomatic activity and state building. The war redefined international relations. This conflict contributed decisively to the birth and strengthening of national monarchies in Europe. The demands of war drove centralization. In France, the war, though destructive, favored the centralization of power in the hands of the monarch. A sense of national identity was created against the invader. Even in England, despite territorial defeats on the continent, the war stimulated the centralization of royal power. Parliament acquired greater political weight. A key aspect was the formation of standing armies directly dependent on the crown. This reduced dependence on feudal lords and their vassals. At the same time, a strong sense of national identity developed in both countries. The populations increasingly identified themselves as French or English. To finance the immense war expenses, the rulers significantly tightened fiscal control. This allowed them to tap directly into the kingdom's resources. Likewise, administrative control was strengthened and streamlined to better manage resources and mobilization. A more efficient bureaucracy was created. These transformations laid the solid foundation for the birth and development of modern states. They were distinguished by their sovereignty and centralization. Ultimately, the crisis of the 14th century was a period of great suffering and destruction for Europe. However, it is also essential to recognize its profoundly transformative role. The Black Death, with its unprecedented violence, upended the pre existing medieval order. It reshaped demography, economy, and mentality. The simultaneous decline of universal powers, church and empire, also contributed to the dismantling of old hierarchies. New forms of authority were about to emerge. Finally, the Hundred Years' War was a powerful catalyst. It accelerated the formation of nation states, breaking with feudal particularism. These events, though dramatic, paved the way for new economic dynamics. Trade routes and production systems adapted to the new reality. New social dynamics also emerged with the emergence of new classes and the redefinition of power relations. Old structures collapsed. Finally, new political dynamics emerged with the progressive affirmation of sovereigns and nation states. Feudalism was coming to an end. The ensuing Reconstruction, though slow and fraught with difficulties, led to the emergence of new state and social institutions. These were more robust and centralized. It also helped forge new cultural and political identities. People began to identify with their nation, not just their fiefdom or city. All this led to a new and more stable European order. Nations began to define their own borders and interests. The 14th century, with all its contradictions and pain, was the indispensable prelude to the Renaissance. It paved the way for a new cultural and intellectual flourishing.